I used to live in a small neighborhood from ages 13 to 18. This took place when I was around 15. I spent most of my time just walking around the neighborhood listening to my MP3 player. Wow, I feel old just saying that. There was a guy around the same age as me that lived maybe 5 or so houses down from me. From neighborhood gossip, I learned that he was homeschooled and had been in and out of juvie due to his anger issues. He was almost always outside, and sometimes when I passed his house, he would start following me. I was smart enough to always have my music down low enough to be able to hear and be aware of my surroundings. At first, I just passed it off as he just ended up walking the same day as I did. Looking back, I was truly dumb. As time passed, he got closer and closer to me when following, until he eventually decided to come up right behind me. He said some truly heinous things that I will not repeat here. I mean, he was right in my ear when he was talking. I ran home and told my sister. She was basically the one who raised me. She told me I was lying and to stop making up stories. For a while, I stopped going out for walks. However, I needed the fresh air and exercise, so I tried again after maybe 2 months. Sure enough, there he was. He came up right behind me and started to say these things again. I turned my music up and ignored him. This is what I continued to do every day until he got fed up with me ignoring him, I guess. Because one day he grabbed my arm. I couldn't get away. Then he grabbed the back of my neck and told me that I should know better than to ignore him. Again, I told my sister. She didn't believe me, and I stopped going out again. 2 weeks later, I woke up to loud bangs on my bedroom wall. There was a garage on both sides of the house, and the wall of my bedroom shared a wall with one of these garages. This garage was unfinished. There wasn't even concrete down, and it was easily accessible from the outside, as it was missing a door at the back of the house. My sister was out of town. My dad was deaf and bedridden, so it was only me in the house who was able to do anything. My bedroom also had a door to go outside, so I ran over and locked it. I laid down and waited for the banging to stop, but it didn't. My cousin and her boyfriend lived down the street, so I called her and she sent her boyfriend down to see what it was. Her boyfriend pulled right into the backyard and right up to the door to the garage. His headlights filled the garage and outran the guy from down the street, holding a large knife. He took off running and my cousin's boyfriend followed. It was right at this time when I called the police. They came out and took a statement, but said there was nothing they can do because other than going into the garage and trespassing, he didn't actually do anything. I never took a walk in that neighborhood again. I still wonder, how did he know what wall to bang on? How did he know I was on the other side of it? How did he know that my sister was gone or that my dad was bedridden and couldn't do anything? I never locked the door, so had he been in my house to know? What would have happened if I would have gone outside? It still gives me the creeps. This happened to me when I was 13. For some background, I had switched to another school that was further away from home. And now, instead of just taking only one bus, I had to take a bus, a train, and then another bus to get there. With my now longer commute, I had to leave my house at around 7 if I wanted to be there at 8:30. For the most part, I was never worried about safety since public transit was busy in the morning. As I got off the train, I had to cross a big bridge in order to reach the area with different bus routes. There were 3 major ones, but it didn't matter which one I got on as they all passed the school before breaking off into separate directions. So one morning, as I was waiting for one of the buses to show up, some random construction worker, also waiting for a bus, started talking to me. He looked to be in his mid-30s. I didn't think much of it as I was easy to have a conversation with. I started seeing him more frequently at the bus area, and I began to find it a bit strange because he would always compliment me. He'd say I had a cool bag or a nice jacket at first, but he never said anything to raise any red flags. Things started to get weird pretty quick when he would start complimenting my features, saying I had pretty eyes or a cute smile. I was beginning to get a bit uncomfortable, but again, I also brushed it off and chose to start avoiding him. I never thought too much of my own safety, as there were people around and I had a cell phone in case I had to call my parents or the police. I didn't see the guy for a few days, so I began to think I was in the clear and forgot about him. Then things really began to escalate. I was sitting by myself with my earbuds in when suddenly someone taps on my shoulder and sits next to me. It was the guy, and now he's talking to me like we're friends. I was really uncomfortable. I tried to dismiss him and went to walk away to the other side of the bus area. But that's when he said something that really caught me off guard. He just casually turns to me like it's nothing and says, "What will you do if I tied you up and never let you go?" I was genuinely appalled. I got up from the bench and started walking away. He got up and started to follow behind me, when thankfully 2 buses pull in. He of course followed me onto the bus and I wasn't having it, so I got off the bus and hopped onto the second one. If he followed me on again, I would tell the bus driver that I needed help, but he didn't. I was so damn confused. I went to school and the first thing I did was tell my friends what happened. I really did not understand the severity of this situation at first, because I was a 13-year-old male and I didn't think these things happened to guys. As I was telling the story, I was kind of downplaying it because nothing bad actually happened in my eyes and there were no real repercussions. Everyone gave me a dumbfounded stare as no one knew what to say. Then one of my teachers who overheard me, to which I'm not surprised I was a loud kid, and in a bit of a shock, brought me to the principal's office. So I missed the entire first period of the day explaining what happened to the principal and the police officer. My parents at first were really confused on why I didn't mention anything about the weird guy before. I was driven to school the next few days until a police officer came over to talk to me and my parents. He said that they found the guy on the transit cameras and were able to track him down and talk to him. There wasn't too much the officer can do aside from telling him to stay away from me, since he technically didn't do anything illegal. The officer did tell me that they would be monitoring the train station around that time as well, and if that guy ever approaches or talks to me, to call 911. I saw him like 2 or 3 times after, and he never spoke to me or even looked at me, which I'm very thankful for. I'm just glad nothing major came from it. But this did really open my eyes a lot about being more aware in public. There is no doubt that we are in a somewhat peculiar situation these days. Quarantines, full isolation, and generally strict calls to stay at home have become our new everyday life. The streets are empty, public transport runs almost empty carriages, and what is left is a purely visual society devoid of people. Unfortunately, people with dubious intentions can use this to their advantage. At midnight yesterday, I was on my way home, alone. As I get on the bus and sit down, I almost immediately register a man on the other side, who takes an interest in me. A very clear interest. He fixes his gaze firmly on me, almost the entire way. I gradually start to get a little uncomfortable. On a couple of occasions, I let my eyes wander across the bus to confirm to myself that I am indeed being watched, which I keep getting confirmed as he refuses to take his eyes off me. Not only does his behavior worry me at this point, but also his appearance in general. He sits, wearing a large outer jacket with the hood pulled well down his head, with the help of the neck of the jacket, similar to the function to a type of Finnish cap. Back up was only the sight of 2 big, dark and intense eyes that wouldn't leave me alone. We then get to the point where I have to change from bus to subway. He follows. I make a few random small stops here and there to check departures with the intention of watching his movements, of which he stops expectantly. He then follows me into the platform, where he clearly stands and watches me from a distance. I'm now waiting for the train, and I'm beginning to feel a fear that he will follow me all the way to the end station where I'm going to get off, alone. First, the train line 2 arrives, and I decide to get into one of the carriages to give the impression that I'm going that way, then get off again before the doors close for departure. Both to mislead the man, but also to confirm to myself that he is indeed after me, that it's not just me being paranoid. Once again, the suspicion is confirmed. He gets into the carriage, but when he turns around and sees that I've got off again, he also gets off and stands back on the platform. Now the anxiety really starts to kick in. Finally, the line 4 arrives. I stood there for a bit waiting before I go on, then strategically slip in the second the doors close. He does the same. I sit down in the front seat of the front carriage with my back to the cab, to make sure that he has no opportunity to move behind me. I then sit with a full view of the entire carriage. Unsurprisingly, he walks towards me and sits in the seats directly in front of me. He leans back with his arm resting over the back of the seats and fixes his gaze on me, occasionally interrupted by him standing up and pacing restlessly back and forth, then sits down again. I feel my heart pounding away. My breathing becomes harder to keep in check. Nevertheless, I try my best to appear unaffected by it all, as I don't want him to see that I'm scared, but at the same time it's becoming more and more challenging for me to keep a cool head and think clearly. A little beyond us sits another, slightly younger guy. I hope with everything I am that he will be with the train all the way to the terminus, so that I don't have to get off alone with this man and can ask to be accompanied home. There are now only 3 of us left on the track, and as I feared, the other guy is starting to get ready to get off on the next stop, 2 stops before mine. Now the adrenaline really kicks in and I realize that I have to act fast. After all, I have no idea what this mildly questionable man's intentions actually are. It starts with me sitting completely still in the seat, then jumping up and sprinting out of the carriage on the station, just as the doors close. I take a quick glance behind me as I run. I see that this man is also in a hurry to get off, but luckily he doesn't have time before the train moves on. From here, I then run the whole distance home in fear of meeting him on the way back. The adrenaline did me a big favor, since my fitness these days is as absent as toilet paper on the store shelves. I luckily made it home safely, albeit somewhat emotionally frayed. I agree with myself that I will never again go out alone in the evening these days, and I want to give that call to you other girls out there too.